Welcome to where the screen door slams and the coffee mug hits the table. You're listening to The Family Balancing Act with me, Maureen Huntley, mom, grandmother, and board-certified holistic and functional medicine health coach. Each episode will explore the realities of your day-to-day family life in this modern era of nonstop texts, memes, and technology. After all, how do we keep ourselves sane and our family healthy? I'll have amazing guests and thought-provoking discussions, and we'll take a holistic look at family health, emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual. Whether it's a micro perspective of family involving healthy snacks, teenagers with an attitude, stressed out husbands, partners, adult children, potty training, elder care, grandchildren, college prep, or a macro perspective of world events, including flu, earthquakes, the brainwashing media, finances, and oh, so much more. We'll find a way together. So take a deep breath, exhale, and know that you're not alone. Bring on the Family Balancing Act. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Family Balancing Act. If you've been with us here before, well, welcome back. And if this is your first time for visiting, hopefully it's not your last. Come right in, pull up a chair, and grab a tea, coffee, or green juice, because we have a lot to chat about today with my guest, mental health therapist Eileen Martin, a mom and a grandmother who totally gets the Family Balancing Act, where we are restoring the heart of motherhood, one conversation at a time. I'm Maureen, your host, board-certified integrative, holistic, and functional medicine health coach, mom, grandmother, wife, and CEO of my family's home operations. If you've missed any of our episodes, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Podbean, Pandora, iHeartRadio podcasts, and so many more. Also at CTR Radio. So sign up for my monthly newsletter and grab a stress less tips at maureenhuntley.com. And never ever do we sell or give away your email information. I don't want it happening to me, and I certainly don't want it happening to you. Boundaries. So a few years ago, I was on a Zoom call with a group that was put together from over thousands of people from all over the world. And we gathered together so that we could create an intention to intend, to pray, to send love to those in need. It's absolutely beautiful. In our little pod, we could pick a moderator, and this woman stepped up and she said she really, really, really wanted to do it, something she dreamed to do. And it was great, no stress. Hey, the 20-some of us seemed fine with that as we began to plan out how we proceed. And our moderator, she was doing a fantastic job fielding all of these personalities and giving just enough time for each of us to give their thoughts and opinions. Then, in the midst of this, her teenager bursts into her room, and her mother was in, and just lost it on her. It was awful to witness, embarrassing, and really tragic, as her daughter was like screaming at her. Her mother was just trying so hard to excuse herself, and she was trying to mute us and try to shut off the camera, and then her daughter started beating her over and over and over again. And finally, the computer just crashed to the floor, and there we were, her cohorts, left in the aftermath with each other in silence. I'm telling this story because it's a common one. It happens more often than we realize, and one that can involve so many different characters. It could be your children, it could be your spouse, it could be your neighbor. But I can tell you at that moment, I felt this in my heart, the pain and the anguish and the lack of boundaries and respect. Yet we don't know the whole story. I mean, maybe the daughter was beaten by the mother, and now the daughter's chance was to retaliate at a time when the mother's defenses were down. Or maybe not. The trauma triangle, the three roles of the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. Where do you play? The victim feels so oppressed, shamed, broken, helpless, and hopeless, with no control over what's happening to them, and their power is gone. They're defined by these experiences. And the persecutor blames, shames others. It's controlling, disruptive, authoritative, angry, and feels superior to others. And then there's the rescuer. The rescuer is the classic enabler, ruled by guilt. They feel guilty if they don't rescue others, but all their actions have negative effects, and encourages the victim to continue to be dependent on others. And eventually, the rescuer feels resentful. This pool of anguish. Which part might you play, or someone you know play, in this triangle of victim, persecutor, rescuer? We all move in and out of these roles at times. Did you feel like fixing the situation that you listened to, the story I told? Rescuing the mom, and maybe having the guilt of not being able to. Because even as I recall that story, I could feel it over and over again. Am I wanting to fix it, to stop it, and to make everything right? So I found an article in Forbes magazine, Forbes paper, dated December 7th, 2018, and it's by Remy Blumenfeld. She's a former contributor and now a coach for creative leaders and entrepreneurs. Blumenfeld writes, are you a victim, a persecutor, or a rescuer? Well, if you're human, chances are there will be different situations where you may view yourself, or actually be seen by others, as all of these. As a coach, it's hard to know which role clients find more exhausting. It's toxic, a toxic dynamic. And I know as a health coach, I see this played out over and over again. It shows up in all areas of our lives, and it depletes the energy we need to get clear and focused, to get to a place of self-care. So per NCADV, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, their statistics page on their website, which will be posted on the show description and show notes after this, has a massive list of statistics. And here are just a few. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. I can only imagine what worldwide is. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact sexual violence, or intimate partner stalking, with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, and the list is long. And 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 women have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. Wow. This includes a range of behaviors from slapping, shoving, pushing, and in some cases, just might not be considered domestic violence. Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries. This list is long and absolutely frightening. The Family and Youth Services Bureau's 24-hour national toll-free telephone hotline is an immediate link to life-saving help for victims. It provides information and assistance to adult and youth victims of family violence, domestic violence, or dating violence, family and household members, and other persons such as domestic violence advocates, government officials, law enforcement agencies, and the general public. But the number you need to have on hand is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 7233. Again, that number is 1-800-799-SAFE. Today, I am beyond honored to do a deep dive into this very important conversation with my guest, Eileen Martin. Eileen is a mental health therapist and manages a private practice that specializes in empowering women. Drawing from her own healing journey, she is passionate about supporting women as they reauthor their lives after relational abuse. Eileen is a disruptor of oppressive systems that marginalizes women and believes that freedom comes from repairing the relationship with ourselves. Eileen, welcome to the Family Balancing Act, and boy, do we need you.
What an introduction. And it's such important information you put out there, especially the hotline, but also talking about the Cartman drama triangle. That's something we get caught in. You're right. We move in and out. So thank you for having me. I am passionate about this. And I think I want to start just real quick by saying I work with women, but I also recognize men experience violence again. So I probably will be discussing women, but I also want to recognize that men also experience violence.
Thank you. Yes, they do. And I think a lot about the children and the boys because they become the men.
Yes.
But here at the Family Balancing Act, we're about restoring the heart of motherhood. I mean, here women are trying to hold up the family, the love and the kindness and and granted, there are destructive women out there also, but the traditional motherhood, and that can get destroyed along the way and destroys the children and destroys the family.
Yeah, it can also destroy the relationship with the mother, even though the mother's the victim. You know, she's not as scary as the perpetrator, which, you know, would be the man typically.
Right. And often we absorb what others are shooting at us, what others are impacting us with, and we have to release that.
Yes.
And who are there but the children. You don't even realize you're releasing it on a child. But your work is amazing. I'm really thrilled you're here. And can you tell us a little bit about what is abuse? What's abuse?
Sure. So I think we have to think about it in terms, people often think it's about anger, right? But it's about power and control dynamics, right? You know, there's threats of harm, right? Harming a family pet, threatening to take the children away, threatening, you know, taking away financial resources if the victim, wants to leave, damaging homes, right? Sometimes we often think that it's physical violence, but violence is not just physical. It's driving way too fast to scare the victim, right? When they know that the victim is scared, it's an intent to, show that power and control dynamics. Damaging the home, punching a hole in the wall, using guilt. So it's a lot of exploitation of the victim's strengths, mm-hmm. right? It's often, that's the power and control dynamics. They know how to take that knife and turn it to get you back in line. I like to think about it that way, right? If it's, if it's using the children, if it's saying you don't care about me, you don't love me, and that nurturing heart, it's turning it back. Oftentimes oftentimes it is, they act like the victim, right? And, as somebody, victims are often very agreeable and conscientious. So go ahead.
Yes, well, I was going to say that often the victim will just placate the abuser. So as the abuse calms down, it doesn't become as large as this big monster in the room. You want to bring it back in a manageable place.
Mm-hmm.
And you're losing yourself in that process.
Absolutely.
You've handed over your power by not standing up for yourself in the process of placating them.
And you become very hyper vigilant. That's the trauma response of looking for any flicker of eye change, any change in facial expression, and how to dance around that to try to calm the situation, right? People often think, I'd like to talk about myths at some point too, but people often think that victims are weak, and in matter of fact, they're extremely strong. They're balancing, trying to keep the children safe, keep themselves safe, trying to appease the perpetrator. And that takes a lot of mental energy, a lot of, mental strength. So indeed, they're very strong, keeping things together.
Yeah. I wonder, and this is a kind of off topic, and I'll come right back, but I'm thinking that how many people today, like the numbers have gone up tremendously for Alzheimer's and dementia. They've gone up exponentially. And we can, there are many attributing factors, say environmental, it could be drugs, could be whatever. But I found certainly with one of my clients, and I don't do the work you do, I just, sometimes it shows up with within the food prep, trying to get people to eat better and that, or I've had clients who come to me because their family members want to get them stronger and healthier, and they're elderly, they're much older, and often when I'm working with them, the dementia, they'll have a slight dementia or even maybe a little further along. And what comes out in our sessions are blurts of abuse. And I even have my own family personal story around that with my mother. It's just the blurts that come out. And once they come out, they're clearer. They've released it. And all of a sudden, it's not, the dementia isn't that prevalent. It will continue to grow, but it's like as soon as you could start clearing your stuff. But
yes,
it's
often we feel very voiceless, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's such a hard place to be. Just losing your voice is losing the very part of you that has something to offer to this world. And regaining that voice is such an important part. And part of that is being able to have a safe space where you're treated, you can just share whatever's on your heart and process through. So I believe that healing comes, you have to feel safe enough to heal. When you're outside of that relationship, it's very hard to heal while in a relationship. To feel safe, you have to feel the feelings that you've had to stuff down. Man, boy, that's hard, right? There's no space for your emotions or feelings when you're in an abusive relationship, and then that leads to healing. So safety, feeling, healing, and, I'd like to also just throw in there, because I think this is important. There's so many ways we call this. We call it domestic violence. We call it narcissistic abuse. We call it interpersonal violence. Whatever you want to call it, we call it abuse. Abuse is someone attempting to take power and control away from you and trying to, like a puppet, puppeteer, trying to manage the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Pulling different strings and knowing which ones to pull, because they've early on they were the best. Often they show up as the best. They're loving and kind and they want to know about you, but that's storing information for them to know how to harm you.
Against you, right?
You know, so they're often the funniest, most engaging people outside of the home, which is often confusing, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's, have you found this in your practice, is that those are the people that that the victim does not, when they tell their friends or they tell their coworkers that this boss is doing this to me or this is happening to me, and they don't see it. Oh, they're just joking, or there's a story there, and they're not holding that person up for how they feel, and so they begin to totally second guess themselves,
which is already happening if they're being abused, right? Because that's about that
compounding that,
the gaslighting, the reality, playing with your sense of reality, minimizing your experience, invalidating what you share. I think it's a good time to talk about how to support someone if they come and tell you that.
How do you do that?
Believe them.
Yes.
Believe them. People, just okay. You might not understand it. There's a lot we don't understand about other people because we're all walking through life through our own lens, right? If we haven't experienced something like that, we might not understand it, but believe them, listen and validate, right? Mm-hmm. And that must be really hard. I'm so sorry that that's been your experience. Ask how you can help, right? Don't assume that you know what's best for the person. Then you're becoming controlling, right? If you say, well, you need to leave, or then you're exerting power and control dynamics. We talk about the rescuer, right? Or the fix. We want to jump in and fix it. And that's kind of the same thing that they're experiencing in the relationship. So it's really hard to know this about someone, especially if it's a family member or a daughter, right? And you witness and you know that this is happening, and you have to kind of honor that they have to be ready to leave. You can't force someone. There's so many reasons why women don't leave, and it's about finances, it's about children, it's fear, not feeling, they've been torn down so much that they don't have a sense of themselves. Like, can I survive outside of this relationship? Help them find resources. My goodness, there are resources in every state. Mm-hmm. There, the hotline that you shared.
Do you find that, is there a certain demographic you think that is of women that are experiencing this more so in the United States, or does it run across all
what a great levels? This is so important, Maureen. It is widespread through all socioeconomic areas. It happens to everyone. I mean, we see it with football player wives, right? And how quickly that's dismissed, and how, because they are in a power position, or CEOs, or all the way down to folks that are homeless. I mean, it's just folks that are experiencing homelessness. I want to clear that up. But it can happen to anyone. It's never the victim's fault. They can't provoke someone to do something, right? The reason why this continues is society believes, so many people in society believe in a just world, right? Where if we just don't do this, or if we're good, or if we stick to our religious beliefs, and we don't, that it won't think bad things won't happen. But that's just not true. No one marries or gets in a relationship with someone thinking that they're going to be abused, or recognizing that. It can often come from our it can come from our family background, right? Where abuse is normalized and we think that love hurts. So we
Right.
grow up and that feels familiar. And even if it's hard, we know how to manage that in some way. So
Wow. That's good. I mean, your information is spot on. I think about many situations that you see on television. The media seems to perpetuate this nonsense. I have a hard time actually watching a lot of movies, Netflix and that, because it's almost as though they're promoting normalization of this behavior. And we could say that around it's just a lot of violence.
it is. You're absolutely right, right? It's part of the problem we have and why we can't eradicate this, because we believe in powerful. We believe we put power over humanity so often in this society that it's tragic. It really is. When we allow CEOs to continue. I mean, look at with even this recent Brian Walsh case, right? I haven't seen any media coverage. I don't know that it's out there. It may be out there where they talk that this is domestic violence.
Right.
We talk about the murder, but add in that this is domestic violence. I can guarantee that there were signs of this way before he murdered her. Right?
Yes. Oh, I'm sure there was, and there's nothing out there. I haven't heard. I'm with you on that. I've not really seen it. There's a lot of stuff that is not being told on so many levels. And I think what's happening, people are like clearing their eyes. They're taking off the rose-colored glasses, and we're really beginning to look at the world around us. And even, even going to a restaurant and sitting down and having a meal, I can actually pick up on, who the bad boss is, and how meek the waiter is that comes over. It's around us. It's constant, and yet we ignore it.
Yes. I don't think people know what to do, or they think it's not happening to me, so I can't get involved. And it is, you have to assess for safety before you can step in, for sure. But if you feel like you're witnessing domestic violence, call 911, right? If you can get the person aside, ask if she needs support, right?
Right.
You have to assess for your own safety first, but there are things that you can do besides turning away. We turn away so much.
Because it's hard to look at. It's like when the story I talked about, I felt so helpless because, one, I didn't know the person. I had no way to contact them. And then to have that, and we're just all sitting there going, okay, well, I guess we'll just end now. That's what happened. We all walked away. We didn't know what to do. You talked about myths. What are the myths?
I think one of the biggest is that abuse is an anger problem. And we go back to that power and control. If it was an anger problem, it could be tied with an anger problem. These men wouldn't be able to hold down jobs, right? They wouldn't be able to be a good church member. They wouldn't be this so if they're managing through jobs and have friendships and seem very gregarious out there, but they're choosing at home to perpetrate violence and power and control, that's not an anger problem. That's a power and control problem. So that's a huge one. There's, I guess, another one would be that alcohol and drugs cause domestic violence. That's just not the case, right? There are plenty of people who experience alcoholism that don't physically harm other people or harm people in general, right?
They're harming themselves.
Well, it can exasperate, right? Because we lose our filter, and it could exasperate abuse, but it's not the cause of abuse, right? I think another one is victims provoke the abuse, right? That's one I hear a lot, where family says, well, if you just don't say anything back, if you're just silent,
Oh, wow.
then we're victim blaming, right? Because we are never responsible in any aspect of life for other people's behavior. We all make choices on how to respond. We can react, we can respond, that's our choice in any given situation. So we often forget that.
It's freedom to be ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I certainly have heard that, that, well, if you just did it this way, if you just behaved, and that is the rescuer telling the victim what they should do. Just be quiet, be a good little girl, and do what you're told.
Not that bad, you.
There are other people that have it worse.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of times, especially if this is kind of a history in a family of origin, is that family members aren't able to support because they don't see it as abuse. They see it as this is what it is, and you have to keep quiet because God knows we don't want to pull up that carpet and look under the family, all the family shame, right? So the survivor can become a scapegoat in a family where they shut up, don't talk about this,
Right.
Don't have it so bad. Why didn't you, there's so much that makes it so much harder for a survivor to feel safe enough to seek support outside. If their own family is invalidating their experience, my goodness, that just kind of turn inward, rather than say, okay, it must be me, it must be about me, right?
Right. Blame, shame, blame.
Yeah, we can internalize that as there is something wrong with us, because this power and control dynamics is crazy making behavior, right? You start losing sense, like, oh, did I really say that? He just said I didn't say that. Oh my goodness, right? So we kind of start rolling through our mind where and that's the intent of the power and control dynamics.
Right. Wow. Where do you go from here? Let's say a client, a victim, knows that they've got to get out, and they got to get out now. What do they do? Where do they begin?
So absolutely. I always say, if you're afraid for your safety, my goodness, call 911. Or if you have a trusted neighbor or loved one, if you know that you're experiencing violence, you can create a safe word that if you need someone else to call 911, say you text Bunny, that's a mutual word you've agreed on, and they know that you need help, right? You can think about making sure the keys are near you at all times, and the car is facing out, outward. It's scary, but you having some things in place to know there are the ways to keep safe. You can wait till it's just, there's things that are in place to help you. It's not always helpful to call 911, because this is another problem we have. There are so many good trauma-informed police officers, but there's also some that they show up and they see the victim hysterical, crying, overwhelmed, and the perpetrator is like calm, cool. So what does it look like? They assume that she's nuts, and they go away, and so what is that further victimizes and isolates, and they recognize, oh, the help isn't there. So hopefully we're getting better at this. And
And
But
some of those police officers, they're humans, and they might be doing the same thing. Not
absolutely.
to say that all police officers, but I'm just saying the helpers that you reach out to might be the very same
Yeah.
type of people.
Yeah, well, we see it a little more often. I don't know what the statistics are, but in power kind of roles in this, police officer is a pretty powerful role, CEOs where, there's a politics, right? There's a lot of narcissism and, think in power in being special, right?
Right. I'm here. See me?
Whatever I do is okay. Whatever I see, we see it play out every day in our politics. We see this happening, and it's just normalizes, right? When
Right.
one congressman or senator attacks another, and there's a lack of sense of humanity that's really witnessing.
Oh, yeah. And I was thinking as, are women, those who've been the victims, like gathering up their stuff, hiding it, just waiting for that moment to get the hell out. And then when you get the hell out, can you get to a center? Can you almost have to make the plan.
You do. And I think that having, again, if you have a trusted neighbor of a family member, having a bag packed and leaving it at their home, right? Having some supplies for you and your kids. You have to assess for your own safety. Does my abuser look through my things, right? Is he going to notice that I am, taking an extra $25 and putting it away from, it's you have to assess for your own safety.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is wow. And as a therapist, when do your people show up? In process, or at what point do you get your clients?
So it's been interesting. It's both, right? I'll have in process or thinking about it, or I even have clients that show up that really think that there's something wrong with them, but they don't understand that they're experiencing abuse at home. So walking through that and, letting them kind of walk through and figure out why, the whys of why they feel depressed, anxious, overwhelmed all the time. There is that's a process. Getting ready to leave, not sure why, or leaving and going back, right? On average, it takes 7 to 9 times for a woman to leave for good. And we don't want to re-victimize them with that statistics. That tells you how hard it is. They go out, we don't, in this country, we just don't have the resources, that support survivors and actually staying safe. We put them in shelters, but they're in with a whole bunch of other families, and they're only allowed to be there 30 days. And there's just so much that we don't do well to actually support folks for staying out, right? They get stalked. Family members of the perpetrator call and say, you need to go back. What's wrong with you? Those kids need their father, right? There's so much to it that people don't understand or know of what the impact of staying away means.
Well, I know because I'm pretty tied to Ireland, as you know, and there have been multiple stories and connections I have there, and even things I read in the paper there that it's the same deal. It's even, and they run their government differently, and they're still having the same problems. The victims so often go back and it's just this circle of shit.
Yeah.
It's just it's sad. And I think if there were a way that we could continue to bring more, shine a light on this, and to wake people up, that, because I think we're all feeling this. We're all going through some level of this, no matter where you are in your life. It might not be with your partner. It might be with your boss, or it might just be with you see what your best friend is going through, but you're not doing anything about it because it's not yours and you're not really a rescuer. But we all have to be awake and aware of what is going on, because it's a micro macro deal. It's going on every freaking level.
It is.
And it's a constant. And I don't even know if it's gotten worse or if it's just always been there and we've never talked about it, because it's an ancestral issue too, right?
Oh, a lot of it can be very, some serious generational trauma of what you witnessed, that kind of thing. But it's also, we live, let's be clear, in a patriarchal society. Men lead, white men, right?
Well,
Lead. Yeah. So
an iron fist.
we're not going to want to let go of that power. And
easily.
They make the laws, they make the policies, they allow what they believe. And if it's going to raise up other people, they're often not real invested in that.
Of course not, because it's all, it's money. And I feel like that's shifting, as far as I feel that there are people across all nationalities, races, and even genders, because that's become different. It's almost like we can't use that languaging anymore, but we know what it is. We know it's wrong. We know it's not a way to live. And what is the long-term effect on families if this isn't broken, if this isn't stopped? What happens within the family?
Often a lot of chaos, trying to struggle with the kids trying to understand and having their own trauma, right? We all, another myth is, if he doesn't abuse the kids, he's a good father. Well, I don't believe that, because if kids are witnessing, right, if they're witnessing violence against or abuse against their parent, then that's not good parenting. We're bringing violence into the home. We're scaring children, and scared children tend to take what we do is that there's something wrong with us, that if we were just good, or we were just, so they definitely internalize that and walk through the world believing that they're damaged, or there's something wrong with them, or, they can't rescue mommy, and daddy's scary. So who do I support here? And and we've got young boys growing up with male role models that are showing that this is how we treat their, women, how they treat mothers. So that's hard to break out of as an adult. Like you have to be prepared to do your work to heal from this stuff, and that's hard. It causes disruption in family systems, right? It creates division and estrangement. It's just so much unhealed pain often, because even if the mom goes and gets support and is able to get out, sometimes the kids as adults don't want to do that work and figure out, right? Or, they try to harm the mom with some emotional abuse or verbal abuse, because look, that's how we treat mom, right?
Right, because it's been ingrained in them.
That's an incredibly painful experience to be abused by your children. after you.
Yes. Yes. It's not supposed to be that way.
No.
If there were 3 tips you could give a client or our audience, your virtual client at the moment, that if they feel like they're in this situation, what are the top 3 things you can think of just that they would need to begin to do?
So I think the first would trust their experience. If they feel like they're in this. Okay. Because they've been so used to thinking that there's something wrong with them, or they've been, blamed for whatever taking on the emotional experience of their abuser. Just trust, if you feel something's not right, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard when you've had to turn away from yourself and look for external threats, right? So trust. Okay. Second, if I would say, reach out, figure out who's been supportive, who listens to you. And sometimes we're so isolated that that's limited. But I would say, if you do have somebody that you trust, share that with them. If they can't hear it, go to someone else. I know that's scary, but hard, but it's such an isolating experience often that we need support. We need somebody that can validate our experience. If somebody invalidates you, they're not your person, but there is somebody out there that can support you. And look for local resources. Family justice centers are growing throughout the country, and they're like a one-stop shop for to support survivors of abuse. Let's be clear, there's elder abuse, there's child abuse, there's abuse in intimate relationships, between partners. It's there. So there is support. If you can't find that resource or feel fearful, ask a trusted person.
Right. That's, you hit me at my heart, because I know that even, often people will feel they can go to their pastor or their local church or synagogue. And often you will be supported, and often you might not be, because that is a place of abuse also. And that's a whole other discussion. But not to forget to go to the place within you, that God source, that energy to begin to take the step forward.
Yes. And those places, those sometimes value marriage over individual. So that's hard, right? You need to try to work it out. So that becomes, it's just like, couples counseling for abuse that's not something that's healthy. Okay.
No.
Because it's usually twisted away. Oftentimes they'll get called in as a couple, let's walk through this, but the problem isn't with the victim, right? The problem is with the perpetrator of the violence. And that's where we get caught in the muck. We have to place the blame where it belongs.
Right.
If the victim fixed it, she would have fixed it a long time ago, but it's not hers to fix. Speaking of rescuing.
Right. And they've been trying to fix it. They've been trying to run around and fix it and do all the right things to fix it. There is no fixing it.
It's a dance of just trying to whatever. What do you need today? And that goalpost is always changing, right?
Right.
Reach this one goalpost. Well, no, now you're not doing this right. Or, so it's crazy.
Yeah. So how can our listeners find you? And I'm going to have it posted. It'll be on our in our whole discussion here today on the podcast. But if you could let them know where they can find you.
Sure. So I work in my own private practice. It's called Center for Counseling and Healing. And you could probably find my website by going to centerforcounselingandhealing.org. I'm a private practitioner in North Carolina. So, yeah.
And I know you have a book in you. I'm doing this to you.
Yes, it's a labor of love in progress. So, yeah, this is important. We need to talk about this. We need to give resources.
This is a very, very important subject.
Yeah.
Oh, Eileen, thank you so much for joining us. Your wisdom is deep, and I hope you come back, because I think we need to keep this conversation going.
Thank you for bringing this to light, for using your voice for all these things that you're doing. We have to, as women, we have so much to offer, right? So thank you.
Gosh, thank you. So just take a moment here, and I want to thank our audience here at the Family Balancing Act to place your hands on your heart. Tell yourself you love yourself. Say, I love me. I love myself. You are of value. You are worth it. You're a light from God. You're supposed to shine. And no one, nothing should ever stop that shining. So take a deep breath and exhale. And know that you're not alone here on the Family Balancing Act.